Welcome to Big Red Rant, everybody. Bad news, Decoldest Crawford goes down. Good news, Gary had no hopes of him playing this year anyways. We basically just wanted to talk about the injury, what it means for the wide receiver room going forward, who we think is going to step up in his absence, and if this is going to be bad for him long term. Before we get into it though, guys, once again, hit the like button for us, please. Now, Gary, I might have been caught up with a lot of other Husker fans thinking that Decoldest was going to play this year. He gets talked about so much due to his name, it feels like he was already in the rotation. What does this injury mean for the Huskers, if anything?
Did you hear a lot about him during camps, during practices and whatnot?
They ask about him a lot.
Yeah, they ask about him a lot, but how much do the coaches talk about him? You hear a lot about Trey Palmer. You hear a lot about Marcus Washington is a name that pops up a lot. Oliver Martin, you hear a lot about him. You got the guys from last year, with Omar Manning and Alante Brown, guys like that I don't see that they've gone anywhere. You know what I mean? And when you hear Mickey Joseph talking about he's desperately looking for guys to step up, and he has juniors and seniors, guys that have been around a while on in that room, on that squad, it's hard for a freshman to come in and start or to get significant minutes, right? So why would you, in a room that everybody kind of perceives to be so deep, why would you take a guy and burn a year when there's so many other bigger names and guys with more experience and guys that I'm assuming are going to fit in a little bit quicker and a little bit more seamlessly, kind of have them sitting and waiting while he's playing or sharing minutes with him? When you could get him, you've got two games, week 2, week 3, or actually it's going to be week 1, week 2. But for us, it'll be game 2, game 3. He could have played the majority of minutes those 2 games. And then you could have played any variation of whether it's Northwestern, whether it's Illinois, Rutgers, Indiana, any of those games that people are kind of assuming are going to be bigger wins. He could have plugged in and played there, still redshirted. You know what I mean? So I'm not saying you ain't going to see him all year. I'm just saying I didn't foresee him playing past the 4 games so he could still get his red shirt. We did the receivers video previously, but I think Trey Palmer, everybody obviously kind of has as the number 1. I really like Alante Brown in the slot. I know people have talked about Ramir stepping up and playing that, and Brody Belt gets brought up a lot and playing, running back to slot, to special teams, the other variations on the receiving core. I like Oliver Martin. I've been hearing a lot about him. And then, you still got Omar Manning. You've got Garcia Castaneda, who's coming in. You've got Marcus Washington, who we're starting to hear about. I mean, there's guys across the board, and there's people you're not hearing a lot about that are still returning or still there. I just don't see where there was going to be a lot of room for a freshman to waste, get a couple minutes a game and waste a year of eligibility by not using a red shirt on him. So, I mean, it sucks because now he's not going to get that game time experience, but I don't think that as far as the team, the overall team, the offense, the receiving room, all the way, however variations you want to break it down into, I don't think it means much to the team.
I think bottom line, we just have a lot deeper wide receiver room than we thought. And that was, like you're saying, always going to put a strain on him being able to make the rotation this year. I'm never happy for an injury. Obviously, no one ever is unless you're a psychopath. But it's if it was going to happen to him, I'd almost rather it happen now before his freshman year, before he burns any eligibility potentially. He's going to come back next year with a more physical upper body, a more physical specimen, period, with all of that speed that he's got. So it doesn't have to be all bad. Now, obviously, Trey Palmer, all reports are showing that he is going to be the number 1A receiver. Other than Trey Palmer, who do you think really shows out this year? We were watching Corn Craze. Shout out to Corn Craze. Shout out to Connor. Great work over there. If you guys haven't seen his most recent video, go check it out. But we watched him talk about IGC being who he thinks is going to be the number 2 receiver. Who do you think is going to be the number 2 receiver, and why?
I would say Oliver Martin or Alante Brown. And I would lean towards Alante Brown because of the slot aspect. You can do a little bit more. But Oliver Martin, like Mickey Joseph was saying when he was talking about him, I think it was last week after one of the practices, all the things he has. And I thought that last year, but I just felt like outside of long heaves down to Torre, you didn't get an opportunity to see what a lot of the guys could do. Yards and stats-wise receiving, I think it'll be Vokalek. I think in the Big Ten, Whipple is really going to like the fact that so many of the linebackers are geared towards run stopping, and a guy like Vokalek can really manipulate that, and so can your slot guys, depending on, what the sets are when you line up. I don't know. I gotta be 100% wrong. I just feel really confident about Vokalek. I think is going to eat against those linebackers, and I know you and I have talked, and there's been a lot of talk of Whipple's super pass heavy, and a lot of people have gone so far to say that he won't run, or he almost refuses to run until the game's out of hand. Beyond that, though, in that passing game, there's a lot of talk and a lot of assumption that it's one receiver heavy. Maybe, but I mean that's kind of the fact in most offenses, right? So like you look at us last year, most of the passing game went to Torre, and then Austin Allen was next. Across the board, you go in the NFL where it's super pass heavy, there's always a number one receiver. He's usually the number one receiver for a reason. It's rare that you have Devontae Adams, but the two or slot guy or whatever has even close to the same amount of yards or receptions. If the other part of what he himself is saying, where we're going to try and catch defenses off, hit them where they're not expecting it and do things like that, you're going to create a lot more on offense against those defenses, especially in the Big Ten, when you have a stable of backs like that and you start to open up things in the passing game, and now all of a sudden your slot can do some different things. You've got a tight end who can manipulate linebackers, and then when safeties are coming down to help out and do things on a Trey Palmer or whoever your number one guy is, if you have a very, very good number two, whether that is Castaneda, like he said, or like I think Oliver Martin or even Omar Manning or whoever else, you can manipulate the one-on-ones and kind of isolate or leave the other safety kind of out to dry if you're really utilizing the slot, or you have a tight end that can attack. I don't know that it's going to be as one or number one receiver dominant as people think it's going to be. I also don't think it's going to be, we're going to be like Purdue, where we've got 3 or 4 wide receivers in the top 20 or whatever of the Big Ten in receiving. But I just think there's going to be opportunities maybe in a game-to-game scenario where you're going to find things that work. So it might feel like our number 2 guy who lines up at the number 2 isn't necessarily the guy who's the second leading receiver, but it might feel like our tight end's the second leading receiver. It might feel like Ramir Johnson out of the backfield's our second leading receiver. I mean, at the end of the year, I think the stats will tell a different story than maybe what a game-to-game basis is going to tell. If that, kind of simplifies or sums up everything I'm kind of trying to tie together here. Like I think there's a lot of variations to what the definitive answer to that is.
I like your point about Vokalek. Him being able to abuse bigger, slower, more run stopper style linebackers in the Big Ten. Obviously, because Whipple seems so adamant on mismatches and exploiting them. But Connor is the bigger, better YouTuber over at Corn Craze, so I'm gonna have to side with him with IGC.
Yeah, rightfully so.
And I'm sure you'll be fine with that. Let us know what you guys think in the comments, and who you guys think is going to be the number 2 and 3 receiving options for the Huskers this year. Can't wait to see you guys for the Ireland game. Go Skurs.